The Italian Renaissance, an era that changed the world. In Italy, the Renaissance begins earlier than in any other country, covering the 15th and 16th centuries. The period is known for the development of a culture that spread across Europe and marked the transition from the Middle Ages to modernity. The word Renaissance is of French origin, corresponding to Rinascimento in Italian. It means rebirth and defines the period as one of cultural revival and renewed interest in classical antiquity after the centuries during which Renaissance humanists labelled as the Dark Ages. The Renaissance began in Tuscany. The Florentine Republic, one of the several city-states of the peninsula, rose to economic and political prominence by providing credit for European monarchs and by laying down the groundwork for developments in capitalism and in banking. Renaissance culture later spread to Venice, heart of a Mediterranean empire and in control of the trade routes with the East since its participation in the Crusades and following the journeys of Marco Polo between 1271 and 1295. Thus, Italy renewed contact with the remains of ancient Greek culture, which provided humanist scholars with new texts. Finally, the Renaissance had a significant effect on the Papal States and on Rome, largely rebuilt by humanist and Renaissance popes, such as Julius II, 1443 to 1513, and Leo X, 1475 to 1521, who frequently became involved in Italian politics, in arbitrating disputes between competing colonial powers and in opposing the Protestant Reformation, which started around 1517. The Italian Renaissance has a reputation for its achievements in painting, architecture, sculpture, literature, music, philosophy, science, technology, and exploration. Italy became the recognized European leader in all these areas by the late 15th century. The ideas and ideals of the Italian Renaissance spread into the rest of Europe, setting off the Northern Renaissance from the late 15th century. Italian explorers from the Maritime Republic served under the auspices of European monarchs, ushering in the Age of Discovery. The most famous among them include Christopher Columbus, who sailed for Spain, Giovanni di Verrazzano for France, Amerigo Vespucci for Portugal, and Giovanni Caboto for England. Italian scientists such as Falloppio, Tartaglia, Galileo, and Torricelli played key roles in the scientific revolution, and foreigners such as Copernicus and Vesalius worked in Italian universities. Publishing is also developing in this incredible cultural context. Printing, just invented by Gutenberg in Germany, quickly took hold in Italy, especially in Venice, which was a large paper producer. I'm going to tell you about two books, printed in two different centuries, both during the Renaissance period. They have three things in common. Each is the first of its kind. They were both financed by the church, and both are cookery recipe books. The first was published in 1472. It's called De Honesta Voluptate e Valetudine, in English, On Right Pleasure and Good Health. And the author, Bartolomeo Sacchi, known as Platina. Platina was an abbreviator, an ancient craft which consisted of copying papal document in several copies in order to then be able to spread it everywhere. Those who did this work had to know Latin, but also other languages, have a beautiful handwriting, and be educated. His encounter with Sixtus IV, the Pope, thanks to whom the Sistine Chapel exists, led Platina to the direction of the Vatican Library. He is the first director of this institution. In this role, Platina decides to catalogue the entire contents of the library. This is how he comes across the manuscript of Maestro Martino, a famous Renaissance cook, and decides to compile a cooking manual. This is how the book was born, and it is the first printed cookbook. Our network has dedicated a series to Platina's book and character. 100 years later, in 1570, another pope, Pope Pius V, finances a recipe book. This is Opera by Bartolomeo Scarpi. It is the first illustrated cooking book. The illustrations were made by Scarpi himself and represent in 27 tables the content of a Renaissance cuisine. Pius V is the Pope who inspired the white habit for the popes. He was Dominican, and their habit is white. He excommunicated Elizabeth I, promulgated the first papal bull in favour of animals, banning bullfighting, and organised the Battle of Lepanto, the greatest naval battle of all time. During this battle, the Christian fleet, although smaller in number, defeated the Muslim one in a fight that lasted one day on the 7th of October, 1571. He is the first pope who united Europe under the Christian banner, making the first international fundraising to finance this battle. All European countries joined, with the exception of France, which was pro-Muslim. Pius V is the only anorexic pope in history, but he had the most refined chef of the Renaissance, the author, in fact, of this wonderful book. This book also is the main subject of another beautiful series that will be broadcast by our channel. And so you don't need to read 1,000 books to understand the history of food. Just watch the History Food channel.